Welcome back to SN Studios. Today we're diving into a story from Bradford, a story about fear, violence, and a man known by many as Mussy from Heaton Road. Mustafa Farouk, also known as Mussy, was a name that sparked fear across Bradford. Known as a local bully, Mussy wasn't afraid to take on anyone who got in his way. He gained a reputation for robbing drug dealers and was no stranger to street fights. But Mussy's story is far darker than just street brawls and intimidation. His first prison sentence came back in 2001, when he was involved in the infamous Bradford riots. Nearly a decade later, he was back behind bars, this time for a brutal assault on his girlfriend, which left her disfigured and scarred for life. He was sentenced to 3.5 years for this offence. It was July 8th, 2014. A day that would end in chaos on Heaton Road in Bradford. Just after 7 p.m, as daylight still hung over the streets, families were out, kids played nearby, and the evening seemed calm, but that calm wouldn't last long. A blue Volkswagen Golf appeared, rolling down Heaton Road toward Tikan and Sons newsagents. Inside, an armed gunman sat masked, silent, and ready. His target? Mustafa Farouk. Mussy. Mussy, the feared figure known for his violent past, was about to become the target in a bold, ruthless attack. As he stood outside the newsagents, his reputation as a bully and street fighter now made him the hunted. With a clear line of sight, the gunman took aim. A moment of silence was before he pulled the trigger, and shots rang out. Pandemonium erupted on Heaton Road. As Mussy dropped to the ground, clutching his chest, the people around him scattered in fear. The attack had happened just yards away from a children's play area, adding to the terror of those witnessing it. Within minutes, the police arrived. At exactly 7:26 p.m, the area was cordoned off as officers tried to piece together the chaotic scene. Mussy was rushed to the hospital, his life hanging by a thread. Remarkably, Mussy survived the attack. But as he recovered, Bradford was left with more questions than answers. The gunman vanished into the night, leaving behind no trace, no weapon, no fingerprints, and no leads. Despite thorough investigations, the police were unable to identify or locate the masked shooter. The blue Volkswagen Golf too disappeared without a trace. For many, this was more than just a targeted attack. It was a direct hit on a notorious figure who had caused fear for years. Was it revenge? A gang dispute? Or someone sending a warning? The police speculated, but no concrete answers emerged. And so, the attempted murder of Mustafa Farouk, Mussy, remains an unsolved mystery. The gunman was never found, and no one was ever convicted for the shooting. In the summer of 2019, Bradford saw yet another wave of chaos at the hands of Mustafa Farouk. Known to many as Mussy, his reputation as a feared figure on the streets of Bradford had been built over decades, with incidents of violence and intimidation marking his record. And on this day, his anger would turn the ordinary act of driving into a scene of terror. On that day, an off-duty female police officer found herself in the path of Mussy's rage. Driving erratically, he sped through the queuing traffic, attempting to cut in front of her car. She quickly locked her doors, aware that the man behind the wheel was no ordinary driver. Within seconds, Mussy's aggression turned personal. He shouted racial slurs at the officer, his words dripping with hostility. "You just watch. I'm gonna get out of my car and have you." But Mussy's anger didn't end with words. As his threats escalated, he pulled out a black handgun and waved it at another car nearby, sending its driver into a state of pure terror. Desperate to escape, the driver sped away, leaving behind a scene of panic. The off-duty officer immediately called for backup. Mussy's car lurched backward, nearly colliding with hers, as he attempted to intimidate her even further. But this time, Mussy's reckless behavior would not go unpunished. When police arrived, Mussy was promptly arrested. But as they checked his records, they uncovered yet another offence. He had been driving while disqualified, a crime that only added to his growing list of legal troubles. And though he was brought in that day, the story was far from over. While awaiting trial, Mussy was released on bail, but his actions continued to spiral out of control. On August 19th, just weeks after his arrest, Mussy was back on the road. This time, he was at the wheel of an Audi A8 on Dick Lane, and his target was an unsuspecting man on his way to work. In a brazen move, Mussy slammed on the brakes, cutting off the man's car. He got out, brandishing the same black handgun, as he ordered the driver to pull over. Terrified, the man sped away, his heart racing as he quickly alerted the police to yet another incident of Mussy's violent intimidation. Mussy's actions finally brought him before the Bradford Crown Court. This wasn't his first time facing charges, but now the courtroom was filled with those eager to see him held accountable for his increasingly dangerous behaviour. Prosecutor Aisha Smart painted a grim picture for the court. She recounted how Mussy had threatened the off-duty police officer, attempted to intimidate other drivers, and recklessly used an imitation firearm to instill fear across Bradford. The charges were serious. 2 offences of possessing an imitation firearm with intent to cause fear of violence, driving while disqualified, and racially aggravated fear of violence. But this wasn't just one incident. Mussy had a criminal record spanning years, with 29 previous convictions for 49 separate offences, including assault, affray, robbery, and even rioting. The judge listened as Mussy's violent history was laid bare, a reminder of the chaos he had brought upon Bradford for years. With such a record, the court was left with little choice. In the end, Mustafa Farouk, or Mussy, was sentenced to 4 years in prison for his road rage offences. In April 2020, an incident took place in HMP Liverpool that brought the violent life of Mustafa Farouk, known to many as Mussy, into the spotlight once again. But this time, he was not the one inflicting harm. He was the one claiming to have been attacked. Mussy claimed that 3 prison officers entered his cell and ordered him to strip. When he didn't comply, he said the officers began delivering blows, leaving him bruised and battered. Mussy's family would later describe his injuries in detail: a suspected fractured cheekbone, bruises on his stomach and back, and scrapes across his legs. He reported that he curled up into a ball as the officers continued kicking him, showing no mercy. To his family, this attack was a nightmare, especially as it occurred during Ramadan, a sacred time when he was fasting and vulnerable. Mussy's family was outraged. Despite the weight of his past crimes, they felt he deserved fair treatment within the prison walls. They took their grievances to Merseyside police, who confirmed that an investigation into the alleged assault was underway. Inside the prison walls, Mussy claimed he was treated like less than human. According to him, the officers showed no remorse, no hesitation, as they delivered each blow. And to his family, this was a brutal reminder of the dangers prisoners can face, even while under state care. After the assault, Mussy was examined by a prison doctor who documented his injuries but ultimately chose not to send him to the hospital. For Mussy's family, this raised serious concerns about the level of care he was receiving. After months of investigation, Merseyside police closed the case with a disappointing conclusion for Mussy's family. No further action would be taken against the officers involved. In January 2023, the West Yorkshire Police issued an appeal, searching once again for Mustafa Farouk, or Mussy, after he breached the terms of his licence. Despite years of run-ins with the law, Mussy managed to stay one step ahead of the authorities. But this time, his escape would take him farther than ever before. Determined to stay out of reach, Mussy made his way to Ireland. From there, he secured a flight to Thailand, using a fake passport to cross international borders. For months, he managed to evade capture, carving out a life for himself on the other side of the world. In Thailand, Mussy lived as a free man. The Bradford bully, once feared on the streets, now blended into the vibrant streets of Bangkok, far from the reach of West Yorkshire police. For over a year, Mussy lived the life he'd always wanted, far from the shadow of his past. But his freedom would be short-lived. In August 2024, Mussy was involved in a serious motorbike accident on the busy streets of Thailand. The incident left him with a severe brain injury, and he was rushed to a local hospital. Despite efforts to save him, Mussy's condition worsened. He remained in a coma for 3 months, his body fighting to survive. But on November 5th, 2024, Mussy's turbulent life came to an end. After years of violence, escape, and exile, his story reached its final chapter, far from the streets he once ruled. In the end, Mussy passed away thousands of miles from his home, his life concluding in a foreign land, leaving behind a legacy marked by fear, violence, and unfulfilled potential. For those who knew him, his death may bring some closure, but also leaves many questions. This is SN Studios. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories.